RusAme reader, Crow Song, and today I bring you the binge compilation for Never Left by Plastic Bag 3207. Now, let's get into the book. Prologue. America sighed as he set the last of the groceries in the back seat of his car. He wished his boyfriend, Russia, could have been there with him, but then again, Russia was busy with other things. It didn't bother America that Russia took his job of running his country seriously. It was good, actually. The man was torn out of his thoughts when he heard another car drive by in the parking lot. He shook himself off and got into the driver's seat, and pulled out of the parking lot. There once was a bittersweet man, and they called him Lemon Boy. America sang along to one of his favorite songs, Lemon Boy by Cavetown. He was quickly interrupted by a call from Russia. He grabbed his phone and answered, turning it onto speaker. "Hey, what's up?" he asked. "Nothing much, just waiting for you to get home, which is why I called." America smiled at the sound of the taller's voice. It was deep, yet warm and welcoming. And, of course, there was a noticeable Russian accent. "I'm almost home. Just got off the interstate," he said. "Why, you miss me?" he teased. Even though he couldn't see it, he knew Russia well enough to imagine him rolling his eyes with a smile. "You know I always miss you, Mary. There isn't a moment where I don't think of you. Don't ever forget that I love you with all my heart," Russia said, wishing his boyfriend was there so he could kiss him and cuddle him. "I love you too, Rusky," America said, a warm tone in his voice. "With all of my heart." "Hey, Mary," Russia said. He started to mentally prepare himself for what he had been planning for quite a while now. "Yes, Rusky?" "Can we go out tonight?" Russia asked, trying not to sound nervous as he played with the little box he had in his large hands. "Sure, where do you want to go?" America asked. He and Russia haven't really actually been on a date in a while. "You know that one block from the coffee shop we worked at when we were in college? On the corner?" "Oh, yeah, that place. Haven't been there in a while. It's that really nice one, right? The one with the really good steak?" America said, recalling a time that seemed like forever ago when he and Russia went there. It was the best steak America had ever eaten. That's the place," Russia said, walking upstairs to set out some nicer clothes to change into for later. "Okie dokie, love you, Rusky. I'll see you at home." "Oh, fuck!" America slammed on his brakes as another car came barreling towards him. Russia burst into the hospital room, tears flowing from his eyes. America was laying on the hospital bed. His eyes were dull and his skin was pale. He was just staring at the wall until he noticed Russia. The taller man nearly leaped forward to try and comfort his lover. He leaned down, getting really close to America's face, just whispering sweet nothings. Sure, it's going to be okay. Please be okay." Russia felt another wave of tears well up in his eyes. He was so distraught that he didn't seem to notice the rest of America's family enter the room. Britain held his wife, France's hand in an attempt to comfort her. Canada just wanted to embrace his brother in a tight hug, but didn't, just because he wanted to give Russia some time with him, but also because he didn't want to hurt his big brother. After a few moments of Russia just enjoying America for a moment, everyone was given a chance to talk to the global superpower in a little privacy. They all knew that America's injuries were severe enough that the likelihood of him living was next to nothing. Britain and France were first. They reminded him of how much they loved him and how proud they were to see how far he had come. New Zealand and Australia told him that he would always be the coolest big brother that ever existed. Canada was barely able to make out any words. He couldn't stop crying, but eventually he managed to tell his brother that no matter what happened, he would always be the best sibling Canada could have asked for. Russia watched as America and Canada hugged. Finally, it was Russia's turn. He approached the dying country. "Mary, please don't go," he whimpered. "You can't leave me." "Russia, I'm never going to leave you," America said, his voice surprisingly calm. Maybe it was only because of all the painkillers he was on. "You might not see me right away, but I'm there, I promise. You just have to look a little harder." This made Russia start bawling his eyes out, even more than he already was. "Russia." "Yeah? I love you." I love you too, Mary." "Ruski?" "Yeah?" "Tell my family that I love them. Tell Canada that I'll still be there for him. Tell Australia he can get another pet spider. Tell New Zealand that she can get a kiwi bird. And most importantly, don't ever forget to tell yourself that I'll always be there for you, no matter what." America said, his voice raspy but firm. Russia nodded as he clenched America's hand with his. By now, the others were coming back into the room. "I will," Russia said, barely above a whisper, just before a machine started to beep, indicating that America's heart had flatlined. Chapter 1. Russia sighed. It had been about 3 weeks since America's funeral. He tried not to think about it as he fidgeted with the small box in his pocket. He had meant to propose to America the day that he died. Russia hadn't noticed that he was crying until he heard one of his tears hit the floor. He looked around when America was still around. He was usually the messy one, while Russia was the organizer. But now everything looked like it had been trashed. Well, most things. Russia had made sure that he didn't ruin the couch or walls, because those would be expensive to replace. There were bottles of vodka scattered throughout the house, some shattered or broken in some other way, others still in good shape. Russia let his face fall into his hands and his elbows rest on the kitchen table. He shot his head up when his phone started to ring. Russia pulled it out of his pocket and answered. "Hello," he said, his voice very monotone. "Hey, how are you holding up?" said a familiar voice Russia recognized as his sibling, Ukraine. Their voice was soft and caring. "Still pretty terrible. How's Canada?" he asked, turning the phone onto speaker and setting it onto the table. He heard Ukraine sigh. "He's okay. I think he's starting to accept it," they said. Russia grunted. He started to feel his emotions well up. "How can he accept it? His brother is dead, and he can just accept it? That man was the thing that kept me going after Dad died. He's the reason I'm still alive today, and Canada can just accept it?" Russia yelled. Ukraine sighed. "Well, maybe you need another someone to get you through this," they suggested, trying to calm their older brother down, though Russia took it the wrong way.
"You want me to replace him?"
he said, a harsh edge to his voice. Ukraine immediately wanted to take back what they had said.
No. No. I didn't mean it like that. I was just thinking that maybe vent to a friend. I don't know. You need to get your feelings out somehow. Maybe you should get a dog or cat,
they said, doing their best to try and de-escalate the situation. Russia sighed. Maybe, he grumbled. He heard Canada approach Ukraine. He quietly asked what had been going on, and Ukraine explained. Canada nodded. Russia, I think you should definitely consider a dog. There's a lot of science behind how they can really improve your mental health, Canada said, trying to convince the tall, heartbroken country. Okay, fine. I'll go to the local shelter this weekend, but I don't know if I'll find anything. Then you can't make me get one. Russia rolled his eyes as he heard Canada and Ukraine make a little yes, hearing that they had convinced him. Make sure to send us a picture of the one you choose, Ukraine said excitedly. If, he reminded them, if I choose one. Okay, if you choose one, Ukraine mocked. Just make sure to take care of yourself, Russia, Ukraine said, but Russia had cut them off by ending the call. He set his phone screen down on the kitchen table and let his face fall into his hands. America's point of view. I yawned as I opened my eyes. Why does everything feel so weird? I looked down to see that I was on the cement and oh my god, what the heck are those paws? I frantically looked around. I was in an alleyway. There was no one there. The last thing I remember was in the hospital. Wait a minute. I should be dead. I walked over to a small puddle on the other side of the alley and looked at my reflection. I was all white with medium-length fur and one floppy ear. Holy mother of... I quickly cut myself off, hearing people approaching. I looked over to the opening of the alleyway. Oh, look, it's animal control. Peachy. They approached me, one of them holding a long dog catch pole. I started to growl. They exchanged glances and started to get closer, backing me up into the corner of the alleyway. With one quick movement, they caught my head with the pole. At first, I was scared and tried to bite at it to get it off, but I knew it was going to happen, so I just let them get me into a kennel and drive me off to the shelter. Great! Now I'm going to be someone's pet. Just what I needed. Chapter 2. America's point of view. I sat in the kennel, ignoring the food and water they had set out for me. I just wanted to get out of here and tell my family that I was okay. Tell Russia that I was okay. Before I was a dog, I always felt bad that dogs had to be confined to such small spaces, unable to freely play around. The constant barks and howls always made me sad because I knew I couldn't help them. Now, all the sound was just like static. I came here yesterday. I could hear the staff opening the shelter. At first, it was still relatively quiet, but after an hour or two, there were more people. I looked over into the dog kennel across from me and started to read the little bio and all the information it had about him for any possible adopters. His name was Strauss, and he was an Australian Shepherd and Labrador Retriever mix. 5 months old. I sighed and walked over to the bed that the shelter had provided. I wondered if there was any way to get me back to my human form. Speaking of, how did I even become a dog? I'm sure I should be dead right now. If I did die, what was the purpose of me coming back as a dog? I can't exactly run a country like this. I wonder how the government is doing. I'm sure that the UN has discussed what will come of it. I hope nothing too terrible. I perked my ears at a familiar voice. Is that it? I looked over my shoulder to see Russia looking around at all the dogs. I leaped up and towards him, pawing at the glass in between us. Russia, it's me! I tried to get his attention, but I was drowned out by the other dogs. I didn't go unnoticed, though. One of the shelter workers looked over at me with a surprised expression. She walked over to me. This seemed to catch Russia's attention. He looked at her. "What's wrong with it?" he asked. Oh, how I missed that voice. But I could tell he didn't want to be here. Odd. Why was he here anyway? I haven't seen him look interested in anything until you showed up. Is he your dog? She asked. Russia shook his head. I haven't had a dog since I was a kid. He kept his eyes on me as he talked to the woman. I barked again and pawed at the glass. Huh, well, he sure seems to like you. You want to bring him out so you can get to know him? She asked, taking her gaze off of me and looking to Russia. Doesn't hurt to try, so sure, he said. As soon as I could, I ran towards Russia, jumping up on him. The woman laughed as I bombarded him. He seemed to push me away. Back! Off, boy, off! He said, pushing me away. I stood there, looking into his eyes. Surely he'd figure it out eventually, right? Don't you remember me? I said, but to him it must have seemed like I was barking at him because he winced. It was an awkward silence for a moment as I slowly approached him and nudged his hand with my muzzle, trying to get him to pet me. He slowly reached behind my ear and started to scratch. I could feel my tail start to wag. I watched as Russia started to smile, a real smile. We kept eye contact for a little while until he looked over to the woman and nodded. Russia looked over at the white dog he had just adopted. He had bought a red leather collar he thought looked nice and the other things that were necessary to take care of a dog. He walked over to his car, the new dog on the other end of the leash. Russia fumbled around in his pocket for his car keys and unlocked the doors. He opened the back seat and waited for the white dog to jump in, but instead it just looked over to him. What are you looking at me for? Get in, he said, motioning to the large dog to get into the car. But instead it stared at him. The two stared at each other for a little while until the dog let out a dissatisfied huff and jumped into the car. Russia rolled his eyes. Dear Lord, was it that hard? He said as he got into the driver's seat. While Russia was starting the car, America put his paws on the armrest and slowly inched forwards, towards the passenger seat. Russia looked at him. Excuse me, where do you think you're going? He asked, trying not to let out a little laugh as the dog stared at him, and proceeded to inch towards the passenger seat. Russia just rolled his eyes and let the white dog jump into the front of the car and sit next to him. Well, I suppose you are going to need a name, he said as he started to drive home. America looked at him, wondering what would happen next. There were a lot of possibilities. He could try and get Russia to guess America. He could live with whatever Russia decided to call him. So many possible outcomes. Well, I could name you something Russian. I could name you something that... Russia paused. He took a deep breath and bottled up the emotions. He knew it was bad, but if he cried too much, his vision would get blurry, and that's not a good thing to be driving with. I could name you something America would have wanted. The name pained him. He just wanted to see his lover again. The white dog's ears perked at the name. Russia noticed and thought back to a conversation they had while trying to fall asleep once. "Ruski?" America asked. "Yes, Mary," Russia responded, keeping his eyes closed as his lover buried their face into his chest. "Can we get a dog?" America said, hoping that Russia would say yes. "No," Russia responded bluntly. This made America frown. "Why not?" "Because." "Because why?" "Because we aren't home enough," Russia said. "It would be cruel to leave them at home all day and be gone so often. Plus, dogs are a lot of work. Who would feed it? Who would take it on walks? Who would pick up poop and take care of other accidents?" Russia explained. "I would feed it. I would water it. I would make sure it didn't have accidents. I could do all those things." America whined. Russia smiled at his boyfriend as he tried to convince him. "It's still a no." Is it because you don't want to have to share my love?" "Ha! Knew it! Is Ruski jealous?" America teased. Russia just sighed. "Mary, go to sleep," Russia said, sounding exhausted. It was silent for a moment before America started to talk again. "You want to know what I would name it?" he asked. He smiled as he imagined him and Russia walking a dog in the park. "What?" "Chips." "Why Chips?" "After the dog from World War II. I saw them once. They were pretty adorable. Didn't get the chance to meet them," America said. Russia smiled. "Okay, well, I'll keep that in mind. Now go to sleep," he said, tightening his grip on the smaller. "Okay, fine. Good night, Ruski. I love you." "Night, Mary. I love you." Russia smiled as he recalled the memory. "How does Chips sound?" The dog perked its ears, making Russia smile. "Chips it is, then." Chapter 3. "All right, Chips. Sorry it's not much," Russia said as he unlocked the door. America appeared in and immediately stopped wagging his tail. "What happened?" he thought as he looked around. Russia rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, sorry, I didn't clean beforehand. I didn't really expect to come home with a dog. I only went because Hulk in Canada made me," he explained. The white dog looked up at the mention of the maple syrup-loving country. Russia smiled at the thought of making a pun out of how horrible his life had been, knowing that America always liked bad puns. "Life's been pretty rough," he said, if only his beloved were here to enjoy it. "Well, anyways, Come on, and I'll let you explore while I unload the car," he said, walking back towards his car, leaving the white dog to wander the house. America trotted towards the couch and stared at it, remembering all the movie nights he and Russia had spent cuddling on it. Next, he went to the kitchen, where he found an unhealthy amount of vodka bottles scattered around. Some were broken, others were intact, but they were all empty. America trotted up the stairs and into the bedroom. He looked around. Like the kitchen, there were vodka bottles scattered through the place. The sheets on the bed had been tossed around. Everything just looked like a massacre. "Chips, come here, boy," Russia called from downstairs. America perked his ears and returned to the country calling him. Though he wondered, had Russia really been doing this poorly since he had died? "There you are," the man said, pulling out his phone. "My sibling and their boyfriend want to see a picture of you," he explained, not really caring that he was talking to a dog, and wouldn't get much of a response. It was nice to be able to talk to someone who would listen. "There, sent," he said, and plopped down onto the couch, letting out a large sigh. America looked up at Russia and jumped up on the couch next to him, resting his head on the man's leg. Russia smiled and let his hand stroke the white dog. "The May would have liked you," he thought to himself, but was quickly interrupted by his phone ringing. He picked it up and answered. "Hello." "Oh my goodness, she's so cute!" Russia winced as he heard Ukraine squealing on the other side of the phone. "It's actually a he..." Russia sighed as he was cut off before he could explain that Chips wasn't a girl. "If she isn't spayed, you should breed her and make her have adorable babies with another dog. Oh, I bet they would be adorable," Ukraine said. It was clear they were about to explode from all the excitement. America flattened his ears at the "make her have babies" part. Sure, he had always wanted children at some point, but the fact that Ukraine had actually said that kind of bothered him. Then again, he couldn't really blame them. They didn't know. "Ukraine, they're a boy. Also, I don't plan on breeding him," Russia said. Ukraine went dead silent. "Oh. Yeah," Russia said awkwardly. America thought for a moment. What if Russia did get him neutered? Actually, maybe it wasn't the best idea to imagine his balls getting chopped off. "Oh, also, UK wants to get together Wednesday night, just as a family thing," Ukraine explained. Russia was dead silent. "He says you don't have to come if you don't want to, and that he understands if..." "I'll come," Russia responded. His voice was all of the sudden cold and harsh. Ukraine smiled. "Thanks, bro. Maybe you could bring Chips, too? I think that he and UK and France's dogs could get along. Plus, I know everyone is going to want to see him once they know you have him," Ukraine said. "Yeah, okay. I'll just bring him. Just tell UK I don't want to seem rude." "Will do." "Thanks, Yuki." "No problem, big bro." And with that, Russia ended the call and looked over to Chips, who was still resting his head on Russia's leg. Russia sighed and got up. "I should clean this place so you don't step on glass or something." For the next hour and a half, Russia spent his time cleaning the house, throwing away all the empty bottles, using the vacuum cleaner to suck up all the glass shards that he might have missed. By the end, he was exhausted. He hopped into the shower and quickly cleaned himself, brushed his teeth, and climbed into bed. America hopped up on the bed next to Russia. The man shot up. "Off," he commanded. America just sat there, looking at him. "Off," Russia said again, this time more firmly. America whined and jumped off the bed, and stared at Russia. "Your bed is in the living room, downstairs, if you want to sleep there." Russia grumbled before burying his face into his pillow. America huffed and wandered down into the living room to see a dog bed by the fireplace. "Well, I'll just bring my bed to him," he thought as he grabbed the edge of the bed with his mouth and began to drag it up towards the bedroom, determined to sleep somewhat close to Russia. About halfway up the stairs, America just gave up and returned to his old bedroom to see Russia fast asleep. "Well, he can't stop me now," he thought as he got up onto the bed and curled up next to Russia, making sure to make minimal movement as to not wake the sleeping country, slowly drifting into sleep. Chapter 4. America yawned as he woke up, but not in a place he imagined. He was in a field of flowers, marigolds. "What the heck?" he mumbled to himself as he stood up. "Wait a sec, I'm not a dog anymore! Woohoo!" he yelled excitedly. But there was something that was different. He had large, white, fluffy wings. "Whoa, I look like Poland now. Sweet! I wonder, can I fly?" The country thought aloud. Then it occurred to him, how did he get here? He looked around and didn't see any people, but there was a pond. America walked over to it and looked into it. "Wait! Russia!" he yelled. In the pond, he could see Russia sleeping. Then he noticed Chips on the bed next to him. He splashed into the water, reaching down to try and get to his lover. "I just want him to be okay," he said before swimming down. At first, it seemed like it was working, but then it started to seem endless. Suddenly, he felt something grab him and start to pull him back up. He felt himself thrown back onto the shore of the pond. "Were you trying to drown yourself?" America heard a country ask. He looked up to see Yugoslavia. No, I just want to see Russia," he said, standing up and heading back into the pond. The other country rolled their eyes and grabbed America's arm before he could get too far. "The pond is endless. There is no bottom," they informed the determined country. But that's not fair," America pouted. "Well, deaths are not fair." America turned and looked at the other country. "So, I am dead," he said. The other nodded. I don't really know what this pond is for, but I've heard the others say that they see their loved ones in it." "You don't see anything at the bottom?" America asked, tilting his head. The other country just shook their head. "Who else is here?" he asked. "Well, there's quite a few. Ottoman Empire, Austria-Hungary Empire, Third Reich, Second Reich, USSR, basically anyone who has died. Unless they are in the same situation as you were, where they've been reincarnated. In that case, they'll only be here as long as their alive self is asleep." Yugoslavia explained. America nodded and turned his head to look back into the pond.
I just wish he knew that I'm okay, America thought to himself as he watched Russia sleep. Russia groaned as he was awoken by his alarm clock. He mumbled a few profanities under his breath and smacked the little black box. Russia rolled over, not really in the mood to get up at the moment. Then he paused for a moment, as if he'd heard something else moving around. Opening his eyes, he saw Chips wagging his tail and with his nose inches away from Russia's face. Russia groaned. "I thought I told you to stay off the bed," he grumbled. The dog just licked him in the face and returned. This made Russia smile. He missed when America would kiss all over his face over and over again to wake him up in the mornings. "Well, come on, dog. Let's go. I'm assuming that you're probably going to want to eat something," the man said as he hobbled his way out of his room, the white dog following close behind. Though as he reached the stairs, Chips bumping into the back of his legs, the man looked at the dog. "Did you do this?" he asked, pointing to the big bed that had been pulled halfway up the stairs. Chips only wagged his tail. The man rolled his eyes. "You remind me of Germany's dog," the man mumbled. "Actually, we could go see him today, or anyone really. I just need to get out of this house." The two continued to make their way to the kitchen. Russia had just decided to push the bed back down to the bottom of the stairs and pull it up later. He poured the recommended amount of dog food into the bowl and set it down for the dog to eat. But instead, Chips just stared at him. "What? It's your food. I'm not going to eat it for you," Russia said. The dog just stared at him. "I don't eat breakfast. Just eat your food, or you'll starve," he said, walking off towards the couch. America just stared at the bowl. Sure, he was hungry, but he really didn't want to eat dog food. So he just followed Russia and jumped up onto the couch with him. Russia looked at the dog with an annoyed glance. Probably because he didn't want the dog to think he could get on any furniture he wanted, but he looked back to his phone and started texting Germany. "Hey, sure, I got the dog." "Ooh, what kind? What's their name? Can I have a picture? Are they a boy or a girl?" "Jesus, slow down, dude. Give me a sec." Okay, sorry." "You're good. Here's a picture." "Aw, so cute." Russia laughed at how excited Germany was. That man had always loved dogs. He loved dogs more than any other person Russia knew. "It's a he, and his name is Chips." "That's an adorable name. When did you get him?" "Yesterday." "Nice. You want to hang out? I could bring Fritz." "Actually, can I go to your house? I really need to get out of here." "Sure thing. You okay?" "Yeah, just, you know." "I understand. How's about 11? "That's great. See ya." "Okay, bye." But before Russia put his phone down, he sent a picture on the group chat of him and his siblings. He knew that most of his siblings would probably not care at all, but some, like Belarus, would be ecstatic to see that Russia had gotten a dog. He then went to a different group chat to send the picture, with all of his friends. Well, more like America's friends that slowly accepted him as one of their members more over time. Most of them seemed pretty excited. Others were complaining that it was too early, because apparently 10 a.m. is early. Then again, Russia had always been an early riser.
He just slept in today. He was interrupted by Chips walking towards him. Russia raised a brow. The dog stepped on him as it made its way to lay on his chest. Russia sighed. Now I can't get up. Thanks, dog, he said sarcastically, but Chips didn't move. He just laid there, enjoying the warmth. Russia sighed and started to pet the dog. You do realize that I need to get up at some point, right? The dog just grunted. The man rolled his eyes. After about 10 minutes of laying there, Russia pushed the dog off of him. Sorry, Sleeping Beauty, but we need to be somewhere at 11, he said to the dog and walked upstairs to go take a shower and get dressed. Russia pulled into his friend's driveway and parked the car. He watched as Germany and Poland walked out to meet him and give him hugs, which he politely returned. He opened the passenger door and let Chips jump out. Germany squealed and dropped to his knees to get on the dog's level and drown him in scratches and pets. While Poland also wanted a chance to see the dog, he let his husband be fascinated for a few minutes because he found it adorable. After letting Germany be a dork for a few minutes, Poland shoved him to the side and started to love up the dog too. Germany looked over to Russia. Should I go get Fitz and Duxie? The German man asked. Russia nodded, so Germany left to go get his dogs. You should have named him Floppy, because of his floppy ear, Poland said as he messed with the left ear. Well, there's a reason I named him what I did, but feel free to call him Floppy all you want, as long as he knows what his real name is, Russia said, trying not to think of America at the moment. That was kind of why he had the motivation to come here. There was a moment of silence before Poland and Russia heard Germany yelling. All right, I got both of them on a leash, just in case anything bad happens. Germany yelled as he opened the door and let his and Poland's 2 dogs out. The first was a standard short-haired German shepherd named Fritz. Second was a black and tan standard Dachshund named Duxie. Chips just looked at the other dogs, seemingly not bothered. Fritz wagged his tail and jumped around, obviously excited that he got to meet a new dog. Duxie seemed indifferent, as she usually was. All she was really focused on was going and getting attention from Poland. The 3 countries decided that none of the dogs hated each other, so Russia let go of Chips's collar, and Germany took off the leashes of Dukes and Fritz. The German shepherd barked and ran around the yard, trying to get the white mix to chase him. Instead, Chips just watched. It seemed like he wanted to join, but wasn't sure. Fritz jumped into a playbow in an attempt to get the other dog to play with him. Germany laughed. Russia, your dog doesn't know how to dog, he said, watching as Chips just kind of stood there, slightly wagging his tail. Does he fetch? Poland asked, looking at Russia. The tall man shrugged. I don't know. Just got him yesterday. We can try in the backyard? I'm a little paranoid that they might run into the street and, well, you know, he said awkwardly. Germany smiled and nodded. Sure thing, he said. Chapter 5. Germany opened the sliding glass door and let everyone outside. Fritz ran out into the yard, still pumped for whatever was going to happen next. Germany smiled at the energetic jog. He grabbed a tennis ball and chucked it across the yard. Fritz barked and ran after it, all while Chips just watched. Chips! Germany called to get the dog's attention. The dog turned his head.
Chips, fetch! He yelled as he threw the tennis ball. At first, he was hesitant, but he trotted over and picked it up. Come on, Chips, bring it back! Germany called. America knew exactly what he was supposed to do, but he had a rebellious side to him and wasn't going to let them get off that easily. The dog wagged its tail and trotted across the yard, not towards Germany and the others. Chips! Russia called. Poland started to laugh as he cuddled Dukesy. Germany started to walk towards Chips. It quickly turned into a game of chasing the dog around the yard. All while Poland just laughed as he watched the two men chase the dog. Eventually, all three of them got too tired to chase each other. Then Chips walked over to the tired-out German and dropped the tennis ball. Everything went dead silent. Oh my God, Germany said as the other two burst out laughing. America was laughing too, but to them it probably sounded like barking or other weird dog noises. The German translates to, oh my God. Fritz looked over at Chips. It felt a little odd. America stopped laughing and looked over at Fritz, uncomfortable with being stared at. The three countries were still laughing pretty hard. Hey, it's almost 12. Want to stick around for lunch? Poland offered to Russia. He smiled. If you are willing to keep me around, sure, he said with a smile. It had been quite a long time since he had stayed for lunch at Germany and Poland's house. The three walked inside. Chips! Fritz! Poland called for the dogs, letting them back inside. Russia smiled as he watched Poland make some pierogi for them to eat. They had a lovely conversation about how boring the UN meetings were. Germany, of course, argued that they weren't that boring, but then again, it was Germany. He loved to work. The only things that could get him to stop work was Poland, his dogs, or when he needed some more coffee. Luckily, with the help of his husband, Germany had been starting to break those bad habits. Hey, Ger? Russia asked while looking at Chips, who was drooling while watching the man eat. Yeah? You have any clues why Chips wouldn't eat his food this morning? The shelter said it's what they recommend for him. Russia asked, still looking at the dog. Germany thought for a moment. Well, he might just not like the food. It could also be because it's a new place and he was uncomfortable. Germany suggested. Russia nodded, taking that into account. He looked back at the dog. What kind of dog do you think he is? Russia asked. Poland looked over. I think he's a mix, he said. Germany thought for a moment before saying anything. Well, I'm sure he's a mix. They found him in the streets, right? Russia nodded. I think he has some German Shepherd in him. Maybe a little husky? Either way, he'll need lots of exercise, so be prepared for that. Germany said, finishing the last of his pierogi. Russia nodded. You had a dog before, right, Russ? Poland asked. The tall man nodded. Yeah, she was a street dog my siblings and I named Laika, he said, smiling as he remembered his younger self and siblings playing with her. Did you have any pets growing up? Russia asked, looking over to Poland. He shook his head. No, not really. There was a stray cat that I would sometimes feed, but it never got too close. Its visits were also infrequent, and one day it just stopped showing up altogether. Sometimes I wonder what happened to it. Sadly, I think it probably meant a gruesome end. He mumbled that last part. I'm sorry,
Russia started to apologize, but the small man cut him off. "It's okay, I never got too emotionally attached anyways," he said with a smile. Germany grabbed the empty dishes and walked over to the sink to watch them. After he was done, the three walked into the living room and watched as Fritz tried to get Chips to play again. Russia chuckled. "He really doesn't know how to dog, does he?" he said with a smile. "Yeah, that was kind of like Fritz when I first found him. He didn't really want to do anything but follow me," Germany said, thinking back to when he first found the dog with its head stuck in a fence. "Oh, and remember when he first met Russia? He didn't like his Ushanka," Poland said. They all lightly chuckled. "I think May would have really liked him," Poland said, not really thinking about it. Russia felt his heart sink along with the joyful expression on his face. Germany looked over to the Russian. Poland immediately regretted saying anything. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything. Poland was quickly cut off by Russia standing up. It's all right, Poland," he said as tears began to well up in his eyes. Chips stood up and started to lick the man's hand. I think I should go." His voice cracked in the middle of his sentence. "Russland, would you like me to drive you home? I can get an Uber back here," the German offered. Russia nodded. He felt bad because he knew Poland felt guilty for saying anything, but he couldn't help himself. He knew he would never be able to truly accept that America was gone. He could act like it, but it wasn't going to happen. It just wasn't. Russia couldn't even imagine himself with any other country. The ride back to his house was relatively silent, other than the quiet sobs from Russia. Germany helped his friend to the door and pulled the car into the garage as it started to thunderstorm. There was a quick goodbye and an apology. And with that, Germany had left. Russia went into the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of vodka from out of the cabinet. He started to drink. He drank and drank. 2 bottles later, the man sat at the kitchen table, staring at a photo of him and America in the top of the Space Needle. Behind them was a beautiful view of the city. He grabbed the bottle of vodka and took the last sip, finishing it. All while this was going on, America was mortified. How could this happen? How had no one else been there to help him? He stepped forward out of the corner of the room. "Don't ever forget to tell yourself that I'll always be there for you, no matter what." Russia quoted America's last words. "Oh, really? Huh? Well, where are you, Mary? I don't see you now," the man yelled. Chips lowered his ears and walked up to Russia, setting his head on the man's knee. He looked over to the white dog and reached down to pet him. "Risky, I'm right here. I didn't lie," he said, even though he knew that Russia wouldn't just think that he was barking at him. "Hush, please, dog. My headache in the morning will be enough," the man said. He sounded so broken, so lost. He stood up and headed towards his bedroom so he could get some sleep, knowing that he had a UN meeting in the morning. Chips followed him into bed. This time, Russia couldn't be bothered to tell the dog to get off. Instead, he almost welcomed it. He missed having another warm body to keep him company at night. Chapter 6. America yawned as he lifted his head up. He looked around to see that he was in the same place as he was last night. in the field of marigolds. He made his way over to the pond, but paused. There was another country at the edge of the water, staring at the bottom, just like he had the day before.
Germany?
The country yelled. He ran over to his friend. Instead of being greeted by his best friend, a different face looked up.
Oh, so I was right,
they said happily. Hello, America. It's East Germany, he said, still smiling. Oh, I thought you were your brother, and I was afraid he might have died, America admitted, looking away in embarrassment. It's okay. Sorry to hear about the car accident. I saw your funeral. It was nicely done. There were a lot of different countries there, too, the boy said. America frowned. Well, at least he knew that his family really cared. Can we not talk about how I died, please? He said, not wanting to recall the look on Rush's face from the other night. Oh, sorry, some countries want to talk about how they died, so I just kind of assumed you did too, the German boy said. You should work on your dog skills, though, East said, staring into the pond. America turned his head. What? You should work on your dog skills, the country repeated. You didn't do anything when I tried to play with you, he explained.
Wait, Fritz?
America exclaimed. East nodded. I do prefer East, though. So, you got reincarnated into a dog, too? America asked. East nodded. It's not uncommon. Japanese Empire was reincarnated into one of Japan's cats, he explained. Oh, America mumbled. He preferred not to remember J.E. after the Pearl Harbor incident. Who do you see at the bottom of the pond? He asked, looking to see sleeping Russia hugging his dog form. Germany. He is cuddling Poland, East said, a sad smile on his lips. This made America smile. He wished he had still been alive so that he and Russia could have gotten married. America sat next to the shorter country and stared into the pond. Russia groaned as he walked out of the UN meeting. He had them every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It was currently Wednesday, and later that night he had a family gathering with America's side of the family. It wasn't that he didn't like them, he just really wasn't in a good mood. He just wanted to go home and play around with Chips. Speaking of, lately Chips had started acting more like a normal dog. Guess that's good. Russia's thoughts were interrupted as he heard a dog barking. He smiled as he saw Chips sticking his head out of the window.
Hello, buddy. How's life over here, huh?
He said, scratching the dog's head. Most would frown upon leaving a dog in a car for prolonged periods of time, but today was relatively cool, but not too cool. It was cool enough that you could still wear short sleeves and shorts, but warm enough that you wouldn't sweat. It was just right. Chips crawled into the front seat as Russia opened the door. This made the tall man smile.
Silly, you can't sit there. That's where I sit. Plus, you're a dog, and you can't drive,
he said lightly, pushing the dog away. Chips jumped into the passenger seat, and Russia got into the driver's seat, and pulled out of the parking lot and towards his house so he could get ready for the dinner at UK's. Russia smiled as he thought of America's little sister, New Zealand, or Kiwi for short. When he first met her, she was still relatively young. She reminded him of his own little sister, Belarus. Those two were best friends now. Odd to think of how he and America's relationship had affected the family. Russia sighed as he pulled into his driveway and parked the car. He let Chips out and into the house, following behind. Knowing that they might be out for a long time, he decided to just feed Chips now, so if he did get back late and was tired, he didn't have to do anything. After Russia took a shower and put on some semi-nice clothing, he grabbed his keys and headed out the door, Chips at his side. The drive wasn't too long to UK and France's house. When he got there, he already saw Canada's car, which meant Ukraine and Canada were there. He pulled into the driveway and let Chips out of the car. Russia sighed as he knocked on the door. Russia chuckled lightly when he heard two voices yell, "I'll get it!" He knew that it was Australia and Kiwi. Those two were always arguing about something. There were a few thumps before Kiwi came out and opened the door for him.
"Here you go, Russia,"
she said, panting.
"Why, thank you, my lady,"
he said with a smile, waiting for her to notice Chips. Australia came around the corner, huffing.
"Why, Kiwi, you little—"
He was interrupted.
"Australia!"
Yes, Mom?" He slowly turned around, trying to put on an innocent smile. Russia watched as Britain came around the corner into the view, a disappointed look on his face.
1. Ozzy, you better not have been about to say what I think you were. 2. Go help your mother.
3. I'm surprised neither of you noticed the dog, he said, smiling at the last one. Both of their heads spun around.
"Puppy!"
Kiwi yelled.
"Can we pet him?"
Ozzy asked. Russia smiled and nodded. The two of them jolted forward and bombarded the white dog with attention. UK stepped forward and shook Russia's hand. "Hello, Russia. How's life been treating you?" he asked, his British accent shining through. Russia winced. He knew that UK was being polite, but it seemed like he had forgotten that his firstborn child had died just a few weeks ago. Russia shook the thoughts away and answered the man. "I've been, well, if I'm honest, not very well, but I'll pull through," he said, looking away. Britain smiled and put his hand on Russia's shoulder. "Well, I want you to know that we're all here to support you, no matter what life throws at you," the Brit said with a genuine smile. Wondering what was taking so long, France walked over, a wooden spoon in her hand. "Excuse me, but what is taking so—" she gasped, seeing the large white dog.
"Bonjour, my petite amie. Comment vas-tu? Oh, tu es adorable!"
she exclaimed, running over to pet the dog alongside her two children. The translation for the French I totally butchered is, "Hello, my little friend. How are you? You're adorable." Britain softly smiled as he watched her be childish and pet Chips. "Well, I don't mean to interrupt, but dinner is cooking and we don't want to burn it," UK said. France nodded and stood up, and they all walked into the kitchen. Russia smiled as he walked in. He was glad it wasn't the whole family. Nothing against UK's brothers, but they always seemed to be arguing. If he was in the mood, he thought it could be funny, but every once in a while Scotland would take it a little too far. Then again, that only happened when someone said something bad about Ireland. Seeing Chips for the first time in real life, Ukraine squealed and ran over to pet the dog, Canada close behind. After some friendly chatter, dinner was served. Russia liked the feeling of being around everyone. They treated him well. He just wished that America was still alive to be there with him, to hold his hand under the table, to sit on his lap and cuddle him. But he was going to get through this.
Chapter 7.
Russia sighed contentedly as he finished the last of his dinner. He might have overeaten a little, but he couldn't say no to France's cooking. It was just too good. He looked around the table. Britain stood up and started to collect plates from around the table and take them into the kitchen. Merci, mon amor, France said as Britain took her plate. He smiled at her. Canada, please help your father, she said. The French translates to, thank you, love. Oui, mama, he said, standing and taking the remaining plates to the kitchen. That translates to, yes, Mom. It was quiet for a moment before France spoke again. You okay over there, Russia? She said, her voice soft and welcoming. He sighed and stroked Chip's head. Do you mind if we talk in private? He asked, trying to keep himself together. She softened her gaze. Of course, come on, she said, and led him away into another room. Should I even ask what's wrong? She said. Russia sighed and let the tears flow. France was a very good mom. She never judged any of her children for who they were. She supported America when he came out. As long as her loved ones were happy, that's all she could ask for. Russia had become a part of her family, even if America had passed. It felt like it was her duty to make sure that he was okay, like she would with any of her own children. I miss him. I miss him so much, Russia mumbled between sobs. France frowned and embraced the country in a hug. Russia hugged back. He needed this. Shh, it's okay. We all miss him. How do you do it? Russia asked. France pulled out of the hug to look him in the eye. Do what? She asked. How do you go on as if nothing happened? It's like you don't care, he said, another wave of sobs coming. France sighed. There is not a day when I do not think of him. I could never not care for him. He is my son, and always will be, even if he is no longer with us. I stay strong because I know it's what he would have wanted me to do, she explained. Russia, I know you can be strong, so for May. Russia took a deep breath. For Mary, he repeated to himself until he calmed down. After a little while, he and France returned to the table where everyone stood. Australia was about to ask what happened, but he quickly received a glare from his mother before he could get out any words. I was wondering if we could go on a walk, all of us together, down to that park? Ukraine said, shifting in their chair a little. UK smiled. Sure, that sounds like a splendid idea. Can I bring Chips too? I haven't gotten a chance to go on a walk with him today, Russia said, looking at the dog who was sitting at his feet, wagging his tail at the mention of his name. Sure thing, bro, Ukraine said, a large smile on their face. Canada smiled as Ukraine spoke. It wasn't hard to tell that he truly loved them. He didn't mind the fact that they were non-binary or that they didn't have any living parents. He just loved them for who they were. That was something Russia could really respect about Canada. He didn't care who you were. He always believed that you could be a good person. Come on, Chips! Kiwi called as she ran towards the front door. Does he need a leash? She called to Russia. No, he should be good, but grab one just in case. He called to the girl. The group slowly made their way out the door. Russia watched as Britain and France held each other's hands, Canada and Ukraine doing the same. He took a deep breath. For Mary. Stay strong for Mary, he told himself. Kiwi, Australia, and Chips were all running ahead, laughing as the dog chased them. Eventually, they got to the park. It was quiet and peaceful. Russia thought back to when he confessed to America in this park. Russia sat there on the bench. He was so nervous and regretted putting that note on America's door. He hadn't even known the guy very long, just since the beginning of the school year. Russia's father had always told him that he had to wait to be much older till he could get a girlfriend. Well, he never said anything about boyfriends, so Russia just sat there on the bench. At first, it seemed like America wasn't going to show up. As Russia stood up to leave, he heard someone run up to him. Hey, are you the one that left the note? The Star-Spangled Country asked. Russia could feel his face heat up. Yeah. America, I understand if you don't feel... Russia was cut off as he felt America's lips press against his. He quickly melted into the kiss. America pulled away and looked off to the side in embarrassment. I feel the same, he mumbled. Russia had the biggest smile on his face. It almost looked unnatural. I was worried that it was going to be someone like North Korea or China. That would have been really awkward. Sorry I'm late, by the way. I wanted to get this, America said, pulling a red rose out from behind him. Now both the boys were flustered, so much so that it would almost put the Soviet Union to shame. Russia smiled as he recalled the feeling of the other's lips on his. He looked over to Ukraine and Canada, who were nervously fidgeting with each other. They both sighed and returned to face everyone else. You and I have some big news to share, Canada said, giving a glance to his significant other before they took a deep breath. We're getting engaged, they both said simultaneously. At first, everyone was a bit stunned before they all started to clap and say their fair share of congrats and things like that. Chips was wagging his tail and barking happily. Sure, Russia felt proud of his little sibling for coming so far and growing into a better person, but the words still stung. He felt as if he had been stabbed or betrayed. He knew he shouldn't feel that way. It wasn't that he wasn't happy. He was jealous. That was supposed to be him and America. They were supposed to be the ones behind their eternal love. They were supposed to be the ones with the happy ending. Russia shook his head. He needed to calm down. He looked down, feeling Chips at his side. This made him smile. It seemed like that dog always knew when he was needed. Russia walked through the graveyard. He walked until he reached the one that he had been looking for. He read it out loud to himself and Chips. Rest in peace, United States of America. E pluribus unum. Russia sighed as he set a rose down in front of his lover's grave. He sighed and sat down. Chips got over and started licking his face. He pushed the dog away. The Latin translates to one out of many. It is the motto of the USA. Not now, Chips. I'm trying to have a moment, Russia said as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. America immediately knew what it was. He felt his heart sink. I was going to propose to him that day. He got in the accident. I had everything all perfectly laid out. We would go to our favorite fancy restaurant, go get some ice cream at the ice cream parlor just a block down. Then I would take him to the park where we first confessed back in college. Then I would propose, Russia explained and sighed. Oh, what I wouldn't give just to have him in my arms again.
Chapter 8. America sat there, staring at the door, waiting for Russia to get back from a UN meeting. He sighed. Honestly, this was one of the nice things about being a dog. He didn't have to go to the meetings, but as much as he thought he hated those meetings, it was hard not to be able to see his friends. He had seen Japan and South Korea once, but it was briefly because they had been in a hurry. He got to see Germany back when Russia adopted him, but now visits were becoming fewer and far between. Russia was starting to distance himself from others. America knew this. He knew what the eventual outcome would be if he didn't manage to get help for Russia, whether he was the help or not. But if Russia died, wouldn't he be with... America stopped his thoughts. No, don't be selfish, America, he told himself. Actually, could he even call himself America anymore? No one else did. No one really talked about him either. Well, he was always with Russia, so if they did talk about him, it was probably when Russia wasn't around. America thought to himself. He honestly didn't really like being cooped up in the house all day with no one. Well, he wasn't alone, but Russia had work. It made him understand why Russia had never allowed him to get a dog before. What if he could jump the fence? Well, if he could do that, he needed to be outside first. America stood up and looked around. He noticed an open window. Well, here goes nothing. He jumped through and landed on the grassy lawn. He looked around and wagged his tail. Woohoo! I'm free! He howled. He looked around and just started running, enjoying the wind through his fur. For the next few minutes, he just played around, not really caring about what was going on around him. He didn't notice Russia's car slowing down to a stop. The man rolled his window down. Chips! He yelled. The white dog froze and slowly turned his head to see the frustrated man. He wagged his tail a little. Russia grumbled a few things under his breath. I'm not in the mood, Chips, he yelled and reached to open the passenger door. Chips ran over and hopped in. Russia rolled his eyes and reached over the dog to close the door. Today hasn't been a good day, and this isn't helping, dog, Russia said. His tone was harsh. America noticed a little bruise on Russia's cheek, so he leaned over to lick it. Back! Not now! He yelled, shoving the dog away. America lowered his ears and looked away, regretting even having the idea to get out of the house. By the time they got back, Russia was still angry. He let Chips out of the car and slammed the door shut, making the dog jump a little. America decided to avoid the man for the rest of the night. The last thing he saw was Russia grabbing a bottle of vodka. For the next few days, Russia had meetings every day, with only a short lunch break in between. Apparently, it was a busy time of year for him. At first, America resisted the urge to get out of the house, but eventually he gave in.
He jumped out the open window and wagged his tail so he could feel the slight breeze running through his fur. He knew he still had quite a while before Russia got back home, so he thought of the places he could go. There was the park, the ice cream parlor, and Germany's house. After a few moments of thinking of all the places he could go, he decided on his best friend's house. He might not be home, but Fritz would. So he set off, running on the sidewalk. He had made the drive to Germany's house a number of times, so he knew he wouldn't get lost. It was going to just be a long run. After maybe 15 to 20 minutes, America arrived. He panted as he eyed the fence. It was tall, very tall. This was mainly to keep Fritz inside and other things, like deer, out. 'Cause man, deer can jump. He looked around for other options, knowing that there was no way he was going to be able to jump over the fence. He wagged his tail as he saw an open window. He jumped up and through it, landing in the kitchen with a very confused Poland staring at him. He looked over to the small man, gave a little bark, and walked over to the sliding door and pawed at it. "Here you go, Floppy. By the way, where is Russia?" Poland asked. America just looked up and blankly stared at the man, before running into the backyard and chasing Fritz around. Poland watched for a moment or two before going upstairs to get his husband. "Hey, Niemcy!" he called. The Polish is translated to Germany. "Was?" he heard the German call back. The German translation is what? "Can you come here?" Germany sighed. "Poland, if it's a spider, I'm not going to kill it for you. You can do it yourself." He called back as he signed a paper and set it on a stack. "No, I think you should actually come here for this one," Poland said, walking back down the stairs. Germany sighed and set down his pen, walking towards the door and downstairs to stand next to his lover. "Was ist?" He cut himself off as he saw Chips and Fritz running around. How did he... He jumped through the kitchen window, looked at me, then walked over here and waited for me to open it for him," Poland said, motioning towards the sliding glass door they were both standing in front of. Germany nodded and pulled out his phone and dialed Russia. Chapter 9. Russia looked at Chips, who was asleep next to him on the couch, a movie playing on the TV. He felt bad for the dog. He had been stuck in the house all day. He knew that it was his fault that the white dog had been so bored and ran off. He had run off 3 times in the past week. It seemed like every day Russia got another call saying someone had found his dog. Russia thought for a moment. "What if I'm not fit to have a dog?" he asked himself. Things had been going so well for the first few weeks, so what had changed? He thought about it for a moment until he was interrupted by Chips scooting closer to Russia. The man smiled and set his hand on the dog's head. "Maybe it would be better this way." Russia reached over and grabbed his phone off the coffee table. He opened messages and went to a group chat. "Hey, does anyone want a dog or know someone who does?" "Oh, I want a dog." "Niemcy, no. We already have 2. "Aw, please." "No." "Why do you ask, Rusikan?" "I don't know. I feel kind of bad for keeping Chips stuck in the house all day.
He's been running away a lot too. He always comes back, but I still feel bad. So I thought that it might be better if I gave him to someone who could take care of him properly.
We can take him.
No, we can't.
Don't mind him. Yes, we can.
I will come up there and pummel you if I have to.
Ha! Not if I pummel you first.
Okay, you two lovebirds can do that later. Still, no one know anyone?
I think I might know someone. What kind of dog is he, again?
I don't know for sure, but he's got some German Shepherd in him. I know that for sure. Well, actually, Germany knows that, but he told me, so...
Did you just...
Ha!
A German Shepherd should be good. He's looking for a guard dog.
Just wondering who's looking for the guard dog. I want to know that they're going to a good home. It's not that I don't trust you to know bad people, but you know.
Yeah, I get it. It's my brother.
Oh, okay. I don't hate your brother, but May did. The reason I even adopted him was to help me cope with the fact that May is gone. To help me be less lonely. I really don't want him to go with North Korea. Sorry.
I understand. Russia could feel the tears starting to fall down his face. Chips looked up at him and licked the tears off his cheek. Russia pulled the dog closer to him.
Well, just let me know if anyone finds a person or they themselves want to take care of him.
Russia turned off his phone and set it off to the side. He looked over to Chips, who was just staring at him.
I'm sorry, boy,
he said, scratching behind the dog's ears. Chips tilted his head to the side.
It's not you. I want you to be happy. And I'm afraid that I don't have the time to let you out all day. Plus, I don't know what I'd do if I let something happen to you. You're a good dog, Chips,
Russia said. He kind of cringed at his words. It sounded kind of like he was breaking up with someone. Chips whined as he crawled into Russia's lap. The man sighed and wrapped his arms around the dog.
You're a real good dog, Chips,
Russia repeated as he turned off the TV. He reached over and grabbed his phone to turn on some music. He went to a playlist he had made a while ago and tapped shuffle. He felt his heart drop as he heard the first song start to play. There once was a bittersweet man, and they called him Lemon Boy. He was growing in my garden, and I pulled him out by his hair like a weed. And like weeds do, he only came and grew back again. So I figured this time I might as well let him be. Russia thought back to the accident. He remembered on the call that he could hear the song playing in the background. He smiled and decided to just let the song play. Lemon Boy and me started to get along together. I helped him plant his seeds and we mowed the lawn in bad weather. It's actually pretty easy being nice to a bitter boy like him. So I got myself a citrus friend. Russia noticed Chips wagging his tail as he heard the song, so Russia decided to sing along. But soon his bittersweet started to rub off on me. You'd think smelling like lemon zest would be pretty neat. I found out that my friends were more of the savory type. And they weren't too keen on compromising with a nice lemon pie. He sang. Chips started to howl, which made Russia laugh. So Lemon Boy and me, we just gotta get along together. I'll help him plant his seeds and we'll mow the lawn in bad weather. It's actually pretty easy being nice to a bitter boy like him. So I got myself a citrus friend. Russia laughed as Chips was standing on him and howling. But what if I run out of fertilizer? What if the clouds run out of rain? What if Lemon Boy won't grow no longer? What if Beach is shy of sugar cane? Oh, well, the whales start to beat themselves. Tortoise shells tear away from their spines. It happens all the time. It happens all the time. Russia paused. He had forgotten about this part of the song. How had he managed to forget this was beyond him, because America listened to the song almost every day. Lemon Boy and I, we're gonna live forever. Like Snufkin and Little My, we'll get around wherever. Lemon Boy and I, we're gonna live forever. Like Snufkin and Little My, we'll get around wherever. It's actually pretty easy being nice to a bitter boy like him. 'Cause we're the bitterest boys in town. Yeah, we're the bitterest guys around. And now I got myself a citrus friend. Russia smiled as the song ended. It was nice to hear it. It brought back old memories. Plus, it was fun to watch Chips howl as if he was singing along. His smile quickly faded. He was starting to regret saying that he wanted to give Chips to someone else. No, Russia, it'll be better if he has somebody who is less busy, he told himself. Russia grabbed the large white dog in his arms and carried him up to bed. The dog yawned and curled up at the foot of the bed, while Russia crawled under the covers and quickly fell asleep. Chapter 10. Russia grunted as he heard his alarm went off. He blindly reached for his nightstand, and when he found his alarm clock, he smacked it as hard as he could. He heard a little yelp as he hit the box of hell. Russia shot upwards, wanting to make sure he didn't hurt anything. Looking around, he just saw a surprised-looking Chips. He smiled. "Sorry, bud. Didn't mean to scare you," he said, smiling and reaching over to pet the dog. He watched its tail start to wag. "Come on, let's go get some breakfast," he said, pulling himself out of bed. Chips hopped off and followed Russia down the stairs. He poured some dog food into Chip's bowl and put some bread in the toaster for himself. While waiting for the toaster, he heard a little dong coming from the living room, signaling to him that someone had sent him a text. He walked over and grabbed his phone to see what someone needed. He saw that it was from Canada. "Hey, I saw that you were looking to rehome Chips. I'm sorry it didn't work out. I can tell you two are really close, even if you've only had him for a few months. But I was talking with Greenland the other day, and he said that he and Tika were looking to get a dog." "Thanks for telling me. Are they married, by the way? I don't know them very well. mainly because they live so far away and can't come to the UN meetings. Nope, not yet. It wouldn't surprise me if they did eventually get married. I think Tika is focused on not dying at the moment, plus taking care of Greenland. I feel bad for the guy, but hey, I have no reason to think that Chips won't be a help to them. Okay, do you think you can message them for me? And we could all meet up somewhere so that they can get to know him and make sure that this is what they want. Sure thing. Okay, thanks, Nada. Russia sighed and put his phone away. It was too late to go back now. Well, it wasn't too late, but he needed an excuse to tell himself that he was doing the right thing. Chips walked over, tail wagging slightly as he licked the last of his food off his muzzle. All finished? He asked the dog, as if he was going to get an answer. He looked up, hearing the toaster fling the bread upwards. He pulled over and pulled the toast pieces out of the toaster and spread some butter on them. He walked back over to the couch and sat down to eat breakfast. Chips jumped up on the couch, too, licking his muzzle, tail wagging behind him. Hey, you just ate! This is mine! Russia said, pushing the dog away. He ate quickly as to not torture the dog too much, and headed up to his office to get some work done. The man stood in the doorway of the slightly cluttered room. He looked back to see Chips staring at him from the stairs. He sighed and walked into the room and closed the door behind him. America stared out the window. It had been closed by Russia earlier. Usually, the man liked to keep the windows open to let fresh air in, but due to recent events, he had been keeping them closed. America didn't want to run away. He just didn't want to feel like he had no freedom. That was basically his name, Mr. Freedom. How was it that now that he was caged? He perked his ears as he heard Russia approaching. The man stopped as he saw the white dog redirect its attention to him from the window. He frowned. "Hello, Chips," he said, walking over and sitting on the floor next to the dog. The dog looked into his eyes. "I'm guessing you probably want to get out of the house, don't you?" he said, looking down to his fidgeting hands. "Well, I've decided, just for today, I'll take some time off work and we can go to the park. So, come on, let's go," he said, standing up and grabbing a leash. Chips jumped up, wagging his tail uncontrollably. Got into the car and let Chips ride in his usual spot, the passenger seat. After just a few minutes, Russia parked and let the white dog out of the car. Chips jumped out and barked happily. Russia smiled. He wanted to have a good last few weeks with the dog if Greenland and Antarctica did decide to take him home. He watched as Chips ran ahead towards the other dogs. He smiled and laughed as he watched Chips chase after other dogs and let other dogs chase him. He eventually managed to find a frisbee that no one was using and threw it. He watched as Chips chased it and jumped up in the air to catch it. The man called for his dog to bring it back. Unsurprisingly, the white dog just ran off with it. Russia rolled his eyes. He knew what the dog was trying to do, but he didn't mind. So he ran after the large white dog. Other people and their own canine companions watched, enjoying the sight. Eventually, Russia gave up and sat in the grass. Chips turned around and walked over to the man and dropped the frisbee. Russia chuckled and pet the dog. "Come on, bud, let's go home," he said, standing up and making his way towards the car. The drive back was nice. Chips enjoyed sticking his head out the window of the speeding car. When they got back, Russia opened the car door and let the dog jump out. He sighed, knowing that it was probably going to be a late night because he had taken more time off than he originally had anticipated. Russia sighed. Now it really was too late to go back. He had decided to meet up with Greenland and Antarctica at the park. He was currently driving there right now, Chips in the passenger seat, sticking his head out the window. Russia smiled. The man parked his car and saw Greenland and Antarctica talking with each other. Or, well, it looked like Greenland was doing most of the talking. He let Chips out of the car. "Come on, boy," he said. The dog followed him as he walked over to the other two. They looked over and smiled. "Hello, Russia," Antarctica greeted. "Hello," the tall man greeted. Chips ran up to the couple, wagging his tail and sniffing them. "Hello, Chips," Antarctica said, petting the dog. Greenland smiled as he watched his significant other drown the dog with affection. It wasn't that long ago that he was extremely suicidal, but thanks to Antarctica, he had come a long way. The white dog turned his head as he spotted a squirrel, and with that he was off. Russia and the two started to talk. He wanted to make sure that they would have plenty of time to spend loving and caring for Chips. They lived about 3 to 4 hours out of town on a large plot of open land. Deer and other wildlife often would walk through. Russia figured that Chips would probably enjoy chasing them around. They also made a good point that because neither of them had too many people, they always had plenty of time to do whatever they wanted. The three talked for a while, watching as the white dog did whatever he pleased. Eventually, Russia had made his decision. "When would you like to pick him up?" Chapter 11. Russia sighed as he drove towards the park. That was where he and the polar countries had decided to meet. Chips, on the other hand, was completely oblivious to what was about to happen. Instead, he was just enjoying the breeze on his face with his head sticking out the window. Russia smiled, knowing that this was the last time he'd be seeing the dog for a while. Eventually, Russia parked the car and got out. Antarctica and Greenland were waiting by their own car. Russia let the dog jump out of the car, but by now, Chips had figured out that something was different. Russia clipped the leash onto the red leather collar and handed it to Antarctica. The tall man opened the trunk of his car, and Greenland started to move all of the dog stuff into the other's trunk. The white dog started to bark. Antarctica hushed the dog. All of the men knew that Chips was probably not going to like the idea at first, but Russia kept telling himself that it was the right thing to do. After Greenland and Russia finished moving everything out of Russia's car, the tall man turned to the dog. He crouched down so that he was face to face with the white canine. He put his hand behind the dog's ear and started to scratch. "These guys are going to take good care of you, okay? Be good for them. I'm gonna miss you, but it'll be better this way." Those words stung him. It felt like he had been hit by a bus. What did I do wrong? America thought to himself. He felt the leash tug at his collar a little. "Come on, Chips," Antarctica said, trying to get the dog into the car. But he just stood there, watching Russia. "Come on," Antarctica said, grabbing the dog by the collar and pulling him into the back seat of the car. America looked out the back window and watched as Russia became smaller and smaller. He barked and howled. "No, what did I do wrong?" He thought over and over again as Antarctica tried to calm him down. "Shh, you're okay, Chips. Hush, you're okay," he repeated. Eventually, when Russia had been long out of sight, America stopped. He curled up into a tight ball in the back seat. Antarctica looked at him in pity as Greenland drove. "It'll be better this way," repeated over and over in America's mind. Eventually, he managed to fall asleep. America yawned as he lifted his head. He noticed that the car had stopped. Actually, he wasn't even in the car anymore. He looked around, seeing that he was in his dog bed in a living room. He stood up and wandered around the new house. The house seemed to be small but cozy. The only thing upstairs was 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. He wandered back down onto the main floor, where it seemed to be resembling a one-room cabin. He perked his ears as he heard voices coming from outside. He wandered over and pawed at the door. Greenland got out of his chair and smiled, seeing the dog. "Well, good morning, sleepyhead," he said. His voice was kind of scratchy. It wasn't hard to tell that the only one he really ever talked to was Antarctica. The white dog looked around. There was lots of wide open space. Greenland went to sit back down on the lawn chair next to Antarctica. While those two continued their chat, Chips wandered around the house. He noticed a small vegetable garden, a flower bed, and, of course, a bunch of trees off in the distance. He was slightly tempted to go and explore them, but it was starting to get dark. By the time the white dog had returned to Antarctica and Greenland, the stars had started to come out. America looked up and was at awe of how beautiful it was. It reminded him of when he and Russia went to stargaze once. "Mary," Russia whispered into his lover's ear. The other grumbled. "What is it, Rusky?" he said, rubbing his eyes. Russia smiled, a blush spread across his face. America was so cute when he was tired. "I want to show you something," he whispered. "You just showed me something the other day. I didn't know you would get horny so fat." Russia was bright red before he cut the other off. No, not like that, you dirty-minded man-child," Russia huffed. "Just follow me. Also, you can stay in your PJs," the tall man said as he walked out of the room. America yawned and rubbed his eyes before following the other. "So, where are we going?" he asked. Russia smiled. "You'll see," he said as he climbed into the car. After about half an hour of driving, America started to get impatient. "Russia, where the heck are you taking me? I was just enjoying sleeping when you had to come and wake." "Look up," Russia said, ignoring what his boyfriend was telling him. America blinked a few times in confusion. "What?" he asked. Russia smiled and pulled over. "Look up," he repeated. America raised a brow, but did as he was told and looked up towards the sky. His mouth immediately dropped open. "Whoa," he said. Russia chuckled a little bit before getting out of the car. America got out too, still just staring at the stars. Russia grabbed a blanket and spread it out on the top of the car before climbing up. Where are you going?" America exclaimed as he watched the taller country climb on top of the car. "Wait for me," he said, trying and failing to pull himself up. Russia chuckled and reached his hand out. "Need some help there, Shorty?" he asked. America rolled his eyes and took his hand as he was pulled on top of the car. "I'll have you know that I'm average height. You're just freakishly tall," he huffed. Russia smiled as he laid down on his back, supporting his head with his hands. America hugged Russia and rested his head on his lover's stomach. I love you, Risky. I love you too, Mary. America couldn't help but get a warm feeling inside as he recalled the memory. After a while of listening to Antarctica and Greenland talk, he yawned and had decided that he had had enough. So he pushed the door open to get back inside and walked over to his dog bed, where he collapsed into it, curled up into a little ball. Chapter 12. Russia could feel the tears forming in his eyes as he watched the car drive off, the barks of his beloved dog getting quieter and quieter. He sighed and wiped the tears threatening to fall from his cheeks and got back into his car. It was for the best. He repeated the thought until he got home. Unable to hold it any longer, Russia burst into tears. He dragged himself into the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of vodka. He thought back to when he heard America get into the car accident. "God damn it, Mary!" he yelled. "Why can't I do anything right with my life?" He continued to scream. "Why do I hate myself? Just why?" His voice seemed to give out on him as it became a whisper. "Why do I push people away? Why don't I accept their love? Why must I have the urge to be alone when I know I need them?" He continued to rant. "Why did you leave me?" he whispered. The man took another swig of his vodka and went upstairs to his bedroom and opened the drawer in his bedside table. He grabbed a little knife out of it and looked at his scarred arms and paused as he remembered something. Russia sat in his room, crying. His arms were covered in his own blood. He was just waiting to bleed out. America, his boyfriend, has recently received a text from him. A text where he said his goodbyes, apologizing and telling him how much he loved him. "To the moon and back, even though you got there first." Russia smiled as he knew his pain would be gone soon, but it was interrupted by a banging on his door. "Russia!" a voice cried out as they banged on the door, trying to get it open, but it was locked. "Russia, you can't die on me!" they yelled again, banging their entire body into the door. They didn't care if it broke, as long as Russia was still okay. "Russia, please!" The desperation in their voice was becoming more evident with his bash against the door. Eventually, a little crack was heard. "Russia, answer me!" they called again. The Russian man just sat there, tears running down his bloodied cheeks. The door cracked again. Finally, after a few more blows, the door was knocked down. "Russia!" America yelled as he ran himself into the other country, cupping his hands on their cheeks. "Russia, please," he said, barely above a whisper. "I love you, Renee," Russia said. His voice sounded weak. He tried to reach up and touch the other's face, but before he could, they were up and ran to get bandages. America was as back quickly as he had left, and began to wrap Russia's arms. Sure, they were messy, but they did the job, until he could get his lover to the hospital. "I swear, Russia, if you had died on me, I would have..." He struggled to find the words he was looking for while under all the emotional stress. "I don't know what I would have done, because you're my everything, Russia," he said, looking into the other's teary eyes. Russia leaned forwards and kissed the smaller man, sitting in his lap. America kissed back, wrapping his arms around the other and holding on to the other man as if he was about to slip away forever. Russia had made a promise to America that night. He would never cut again. Russia threw the knife back into the drawer and was terrified what he was almost about to do. How had he been blind enough to just want to hurt himself? He reached for his phone and dialed France. Bonjour. How may I help you? He heard her voice in the other side. France? He said, trying not to let his sobs get in the way. He heard her let out a little gasp. Russia, are you okay? She asked, like a worried mother. He shook his head, even though she couldn't see it. No, I'm not. Can you please come over? I need someone who will listen. Really listen, he said, sniffling and wiping tears away. I will be there right away. Stay where you are. I'm coming, she said. He could hear the shuffling and her running out the door and getting into the car. Do you want to stay on the call or wait for me to get there? She asked. I can wait. Okay, hang tight, Russia, she said before hanging up. A few minutes later, France burst through the door. Russia! She called. In the bedroom, he called back. He heard her rush up the stairs and into the bedroom. She gasped at the man collapsed on the floor, soaked in his own tears. She immediately rushed over and hugged him. He hugged back. Thank you for coming, he said. I didn't think you would. I was afraid you wouldn't. I was afraid no one was. Why wouldn't I come? That's what family is for, she said, pulling out of the hug to look him in the eye. Come on. I'm going to make you some tea, and you may vent to me all you'd like, she said. So, for the next hour, that's what Russia did. He explained everything to her, and she listened. She listened to all of it. Eventually, she decided that it was best if he came and spent the night at her and UK's house, just in case something were to happen. He reluctantly agreed. Russia didn't exactly like being treated like a child, but it felt like someone cared, and that's all he really needed right now.
Chapter 13.
America sighed as he stared into the pond, watching his mother care for Russia because he couldn't. The thought kept resurfacing, no matter how much he pushed it away or tried to drown it in something else. It was haunting him. Why did Russia want to get rid of him? Was it because he ran away so much? He thought life was going well. America didn't bother to turn his head as he heard someone approach from behind. He just assumed it was East. Well, what do we have here? The voice said. America froze, instantly recognizing the voice. Hello, Confederate, he said, his tone laced with malice. Hello, Union. How's life been treating ya? Not too well, apparently, because you're dead. He laughed, amused by his own joke, if you could even call it that. What do you want, Con? America grumbled as he stood up, still not turning around to look the other in the eyes. Oh, I just thought I would stop and say hello to my favorite pal, he said. America finally turned around to see the face of his long-lost enemy. Confederate wore a large grin. His teeth were sharp and pointed.
No, Con. What the hell do you want? America asked, clenching his hands into fists, not breaking eye contact. Confederate laughed. Oh, silly Amay. Don't Amay me, the man yelled. Oh, don't you know, it's rude to interrupt people, Union. I was telling the truth, by the way. I just wanted to stop by and say hello, Confederate said, starting to circle the country. By now, America had enough. He swung a punch at Confederate, knocking him backwards and making him fall into the edge of the pond. The man reached up to touch where America had punched him. He slowly looked back up and made eye contact with the other. Well then, he said, standing back up. Confederate cracked his knuckles before punching America as hard as he could. America stumbled backwards before launching himself at the other country. They both punched, hit, scratched, and hurt each other in any way they could. Confederate! A voice echoed through the open field. Both Americans stopped at the voice. They watched as Yugoslavia flew down towards them, an annoyed expression on his face. Hello, Confederate, he said, staring at the country. Aren't you supposed to be somewhere? The Slav said, raising a brow. Confederate gulped. Yugoslavia cleared his throat. With that, Confederate jumped up and flew off. America was so confused. What the heck was that? He asked, scratching the back of his head. Well, I'm basically the peacekeeper here. I make sure that there is minimal negative contact between countries. It's just kind of the job I adopted myself because no one else was doing it. So, if you're ever having trouble with someone, just call me and I'll come running, he explained. Oh, well, thank you, America said, standing up. Yugoslavia nodded. No problem, he said. America jolted awake. He looked around to see Greenland cooking in the kitchen while Antarctica was sipping coffee and resting his head on Greenland's shoulder. He wagged his tail slightly, catching the attention of the country. Well, good morning, Chips, Antarctica said with his usual smile. He motioned towards a dog bowl on the other side of the kitchen. He trotted over to see that it was filled with dog food. He wagged his tail and started to eat. After a little while of just kind of laying around, Antarctica opened up the door and let him outside. He and Greenland walked over to the little vegetable garden America had found yesterday. They started to pull out the weeds, water the plants, and check if anything edible had been growing. Chips just sat and watched from a distance. Antarctica looked over to the dog. You do realize that you can wander around any of the property, right? Just make sure to come back by noon so we know you aren't dead, he said. Chips stood up and wagged his tail. He let out a bark or two as he ran towards the woods. Once he got to the edge of the forest, he stopped to just listen. He could hear the faint sounds of a woodpecker smashing its head into a tree. There was a faint rustle in the bushes. He looked over. A rabbit. He wagged his tail and lunged forwards, scaring it. He started to run after it. It was agile, much more so than him, but he was still quick. Eventually, he slowed down to a stop as the rabbit disappeared into the forest. He sat down and panted. Looking up, he saw 3 deer staring at him. They all just stared until something spooked the deer, and they ran off into the forest. America yawned and looked around. This would be a perfect place to say that he had no idea where he was. Which is true. He doesn't really know where he is. But America isn't a stupid character, so he had kept an idea of what direction Antarctica and Greenland's house was in.
He turned around and started walking in the general direction. Antarctica let out a little gasp as he saw the white dog return. Greenland looked over and chuckled. "My goodness, Chips, you're covered in sticks and burrs," Antarctica exclaimed. The man sighed and left to go get a brush. A few moments later, he returned and started to brush through the dog's white fur, removing any of the sharp-edged seeds from the annoying weed. The man sighed as he finished brushing the dog. He then got up to go join his lover again. America walked over to the front of the house. It didn't really have a driveway, just a place where they had parked their car so much that it had just become dirt, and the grass was gone. It was like that for a mile or two before it came an actual concrete road. America sat in the middle of their driveway and looked down the road as the sun started to set. He was tempted to try and get back to Russia by running away, but he knew that it would be a terrible idea to do at night. It was a 3 to 4 hour drive, so who knows how long it would be to walk. He sighed and just stared down at the road, wondering when he could see Russia. Chapter 14. America sat on the front porch of the house, the sun just barely peeking over the horizon. Antarctica and Greenland were getting ready inside. Today was a UN meeting, and this one was one that the two polar countries decided to go to. They had missed the last two. The door creaked open as Antarctica opened it and stepped out into the porch, slightly startled by the fact that the white dog was just laying there. "Well, look who's up early," he said, bending over to pet the dog. Chips wagged his tail, showing that he liked the form of affection. Greenland walked out and smiled as Antarctica pet the dog. "He's so cute," the red and white country thought. "We ready to go?" he asked. Antarctica stood up and nodded. The two opened the back door of their car and let Chips jump in. Sure, he didn't exactly like sitting in the back, but he didn't mind much that he was going to crawl into Antarctica's lap. With that, they were off. Chips pawed at the car door as he saw the UN building getting closer. Greenland and Antarctica chuckled. "Calm down, boy," Antarctica said through his giggles. Chips let out a little bark and whine. He was starting to get impatient. Eventually, Greenland parked the car and they all got out. Antarctica braced himself as he held on to the under end of the leash. Chips looked around frantically, his tail high in the air. He saw Russia's car, so he was definitely there. So where was he? "He's inside already. He also says that UN said it was okay to bring Chips in," Antarctica explained. Greenland nodded. The dog couldn't stop wagging his tail as they walked down the hallways of the large building. There were a few odd looks here and there. No one was really allowed to bring animals, so if there was a dog, it must have been very important. Which was true. This was a very important dog, even if no one knew how important. "You ready, Chips?" Antarctica asked in a baby voice as Greenland opened the door. There were already a few countries inside: Germany, Poland, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Ukraine, Canada, Belarus, Kazakhstan, a few others, and Russia! The white dog flung himself forward and jumped up onto the table, running towards the tall Slav country he had missed so much. He wrapped his arms around the dog as his face was covered in dog slobber from all the licks. Normally, he would have been disgusted, but this was different.
Excuse me, but what is that?
North Korea asked, giving a disgusted face. Russia glared at the shorter country.
He's his dog, and he hasn't seen him in 2.5 weeks,
Germany said, sounding a little angry. Poland set his hand on his husband's as a gentle reminder to calm down, so nothing escalated into a fight. North Korea just rolled his eyes. Eventually, more and more countries filled the room. UN had asked Russia to get chips off the table for understandable reasons, so instead, the white dog just sat at Russia's feet. UN walked up to the podium at the end of the room, farthest from the door. "Good morning, everyone," he greeted, seeming a little happier than usual. Some countries mumbled a little hello or good morning back. "Before I start, I'd like to introduce everyone to my new assistant," UN said, welcoming a man up to the podium. He started to say a few things that America wasn't really paying attention to. Something was off about this guy. He didn't know what, but he wasn't getting good vibes. The rest of the meeting was the normal, painfully boring, just sit and listen to UN talk meeting that everyone but Germany seemed to dread. For the most part, Russia was spacing out. He had his chin resting in his hand as he leaned on the table. A few countries looked like they had fallen asleep. Then there was Germany, who was taking notes on a little notepad. The room was still uncomfortable for America. UN's assistant was just standing in the corner. There wasn't anything unusual about him. He had on a nice black suit and pants, much nicer than what anyone else in the room was wearing. There was just something about him America didn't like. Eventually, the meeting ended and everyone made their way out. A few countries walked over to pet Chips, but now Antarctica was sitting in the car with Chips, talking to Russia as he waited for Greenland to finish using the restroom. America looked out the car window, watching Germany, Poland, and UN talk from a distance. He perked his ears as he saw a man in a suit watch from a distance, reaching for his belt. Suddenly, he started to bark, and bark loud. "What is it, Chips?" Antarctica asked, looking over to the dog. Chips started to scratch at the window with his paws. "Hey!" Antarctica said. He rolled down the window. Suddenly, the white dog leaned out of the car and bolted towards the man in the black suit. "Chips!" Russia and Antarctica called, but he kept running through the parking lot. Fear struck him as he watched the man start to aim the handgun at Poland. Chips leaped forward, biting down on the man's free hand. The man jerked his hand upwards as he pulled the trigger because of the sudden pain in his left wrist. He let out a scream of pain, but the dog didn't let go. "Security!" UN yelled. The man knocked the dog off and aimed. "Chips!" Russia yelled. There was a loud bang and a yelp. Then dead silence. Chapter 15. Russia sat in the waiting room, fidgeting with his hands. Germany was hugging Poland, trying to keep him calm after almost being shot. Greenland and Antarctica were quietly talking to each other. It was hard to know that not only had their dog just been shot, but they had almost witnessed an assassination. The 5 countries looked up as a veterinarian walked through the door into the lobby. "Which one of you is the owner of Chips?" he asked. Antarctica raised his hand. "We are, sir," he said. "But please, whatever you have to tell us, tell Russia first," he said. The man looked a little surprised. "Well, okay. Mr. Russia, if you could follow me, please," the vet said. Russia stood up and followed. They walked through the door and down a little hallway, turning into an open door on the left. There, laying on a table, was a white dog, with his eyes closed and his back left leg in a cast. Russia wanted to lunge forward and give some much-needed attention to the dog, but he knew that he couldn't at the moment. "He'll live, luckily. The bullet only just nicked his femur. It should take about 6 weeks to heal fully," the man explained. Russia nodded, not taking his eyes off the dog. Russia carried the white dog into his house and set him on the couch. Because the whole thing had taken a while, Antarctica and Greenland had just decided to stay the night. Russia, of course, offered to take care of Chips, which they, of course, allowed. Germany and Poland offered to give the couple a place to stay. The tall man took a seat next to the dog, gently scratching behind the dog's ear. He smiled softly as he and Chips stared into each other's eyes. He was going to be sad when Antarctica and Greenland had to go back home, but for now he could just enjoy the time he had with his counterpart. Russia reached for the remote and turned on the TV. He smiled as a show that he and America used to watch was on. Chips seemed to take interest, wagging his tail whenever a funny part played. Sometimes Russia wondered about the dog. He did act like a human sometimes. Perhaps he was just a little odd. Yeah, just a little odd. He smiled sadly as one of America's favorite episodes started to play. Russia reached into his pocket and pulled out the small box. The small box that had protected the 2 rings that was supposed to tie the knot between him and his beloved America. His attention was soon interrupted by Chips licking his hand. He smiled and stroked the dog. "You're a good dog, Chips," the man said. The dog wagged his tail slightly. Russia sighed and looked at the TV, allowing Chips to rest his head on the man's leg and fall asleep. After about an hour, Russia noticed that he was starting to doze off. He turned the TV off and picked up the dog, carrying him to his room. He gently set Chips at the foot of his bed before changing into something more comfortable and crawling under the covers. Russia gave one last look to the sleeping dog before turning off the lamp and falling asleep. Russia sighed as he scratched behind the dog's ear. It was now the 2nd time he was saying goodbye to the dog. "You'll be a good boy," he said before moving out of the way. Then Poland and Germany walked up. There were tears threatening to fall down both their faces. Poland hugged the dog. This dog had just saved his life, and now he had to say goodbye. Life isn't fair. After letting his husband drown the dog in hugs and kisses, Germany stepped forward. He couldn't help it and started to cry. The man was too embarrassed to actually say anything, but if it was just them, he would have had a lot more to say. He smiled as he felt Chips licking his cheek. "Good boy," he whispered. After everyone had said their goodbyes, Antarctica and Greenland drove off. The drive was long, and America wasn't tired enough to sleep. So instead, he just watched the world go by as they drove away from civilization and into the countryside. Finally, after a few hours, Greenland pulled into their driveway. He opened the car door and helped the dog out, setting him safely on the ground. "Come here, Chips," Antarctica said, already standing at the door. Yes, the two knew that the dog needed rest, but they also knew that he couldn't just sit around all day. Greenland stood behind Chips, ready to catch him or carry him if need be. It was a slow process, but eventually Chips reached the door. Antarctica smiled. "Good boy, Chips," he said. The dog yawned and walked over to his dog bed and plopped down. He curled up into a little ball and just stared off into space. Something was off. This wasn't like with UN's assistant or anything like that. It just didn't feel right. After a few moments of thinking, it hit America. Russia. He needed Russia. And whether the man knew it or not, he needed him. He shakily stood up and walked to the front door. He just sat there, staring out and down the road, and waited until he was sure Antarctica and Greenland were asleep. The house was silent. America stood and thought about how he was going to get out. Then he remembered that Greenland and Antarctica didn't lock the doors because they were out in the middle of nowhere. There was no fear of robbery. America did his best to pull the door open. After a few attempts, he succeeded. Then he quickly pushed at the screen door. "Russia, here I come," he told himself as he started to limp down the road. He found that just walking was a little slow going, so he tried trotting. It was definitely faster, but he got tired quickly. He knew he couldn't run. There was just no way that was happening. He decided to go with the trotting. It felt like the road was never ending, just an infinite line forwards in the darkness. It was a little haunting to America. Sometimes he wondered if he was still going the right way. Then he saw a speed limit sign. He started to wag his tail. If he was in a car, that would mean only 1 hour left, so he trudged onward. Finally, he had reached the city. America had lived here for a long time, so he knew how to get around. He looked around at the buildings, getting his bearings before he continued to his and Russia's house. He looked around as he walked through the city. America had never really appreciated how beautiful it looked at night. It was nice. By the time he reached Russia's house, he was far too exhausted to try and wake Russia up to let him in. So he just plopped down right in front of the door and fell asleep. Chapter 16. Russia yawned and stretched as he woke up. He missed having Chips at the foot of his bed. It was nice. The man stood and made his way downstairs to make himself a cup of coffee. He sipped the warm drink out of his mug. He glanced at the time and jumped a little. Russia set the coffee down and ran upstairs to quickly pull on some clothes for his meeting. He ran back downstairs and finished his coffee before grabbing a large folder and heading towards the door. He pushed the door open and heard a yelp and something fall into his bushes. "What the heck?" he thought. He carefully opened the door and stuck his head out to see a very annoyed-looking Chips sticking his head out of a bush. "Wait a minute," Russia mumbled under his breath. He thought for a moment. The man reached into his pocket and called Antarctica. After ringing a few times, Antarctica finally answered. "Hello, it's Antarctica. How may I help you?" Russia heard Antarctica say. The man on the other side sounded tired. "Oh, hello, Antarctica. Sorry if I woke you up, but we have a situation."
Russia said, looking at Chips, who he was helping get out of the bush. What's wrong? You see Chips anywhere? No, we were just about to call you because we've been searching all around the house and can't find him. Yeah, well, I found him. He's sitting in front of my door. It went dead silent for a moment or two. How did he even manage to get to your house with an injured leg? Hell if I know, Russia said, looking back to Chips. Hey, can we figure this out later? I need to be at the meeting. Oh crap, I'm going to be late. Russia picked up Chips and set him down in the passenger seat before getting into the driver's seat. Okay, yeah, talk later. Bye. Bye, Russia said before hanging up and speeding off to his meeting. Chips just watched him as he did his best not to get a speeding ticket. He knew he couldn't leave Chips in the car because it was too warm, so he trapped the dog and carried him into the UN building. Sure, it wasn't a UN meeting, but it was basically the office building for all countries. He speed-walked through the hallways to the room where he and other countries, a part of the G20, were meeting. They all looked over to him as he stood in the doorway. Germany rose a brow in confusion. Is that Chips? I thought that... Yeah, we don't know, Russia said, cutting the man off. He looked around and set the dog in one of the chairs before taking a seat himself. For the most part, the meeting was uneventful. He understood that it was supposed to be important, but he was stuck thinking about how Chips had even managed to get to his house. It was a 4-hour drive from the UN office to Antarctica and Greenland's house. Russia! Hello! Germany said, waving a hand in front of the taller man's face. He said, finally snapping out of it. Germany sighed. Here's the paperwork, he said, sliding Russia a large folder filled to the brim with paperwork. Russia's eyes widened. This is a lot. I don't know if I can. Chill, you don't have to do all of it. Most of it is honestly just a waste of paper. So don't worry too much. The German looked over to Chips, who was sleeping in the chair. He looked quite peaceful. You gonna keep him? He asked. Russia looked over at the sleeping dog. I don't know. I'd like to. It just feels wrong to be apart from him, you know? He said, staring at the dog. Germany smiled and nodded. Yeah, I feel the same way about Fritz, he said, smiling as he remembered the first time he met the dog. I'm not sure how I'm going to tell Antarctica and Greenland, though. What if they want him back? Russia said, putting his face into his hands. Germany set his hand on Russia's shoulder. I'm sure they'll understand, he said. Russia pulled out his phone and called Antarctica, telling him that he wanted to keep Chips and sorry for all the trouble. Antarctica laughed lightly, saying that he understood and thought it was better this way too. They both decided over the weekend he could come over and drop off all of Chip's stuff. Russia smiled as he hung up and looked over to Chips, who was wagging his tail and looking back. The man leaned over and hugged the dog, making sure not to hurt him. Germany chuckled as Chips licked the side of Russia's face. You know, Poland is going to be very happy that Chips is staying. He was a little angry that you thought you couldn't keep him. He wanted to leave the decision up to you. He's your dog, after all, Germany said, helping Russia collect his things. Really? Russia said, chuckling a little. Yeah, he was saying things like, what's Fritz gonna do when he can't play with Floppy? Dukesy won't play with him. And, I don't want Floppy to go. It was pretty funny, actually. I wish I got it on video. Germany said, laughing a little. Well, it's almost lunchtime. I should be heading back now and going through all those papers, Russia said, bending over and picking Chips up. The dog grunted, almost as if he was protesting against being carried. But at the same time, he was cuddling into Russia's chest. A strange dog indeed. Chapter 17. Russia smiled as he put the black tie on. He was wearing a white dress shirt and black pants. The man looked over to his white dog, who was still wagging his tail happily. Come on, Chips, let's go, he said with a smile, as they both walked to the car and got in. Russia, of course, in the driver's seat, and Chips in the passenger seat. He started up the car and grabbed his phone to play some music. Russia scrolled through till he got to a certain song and tapped on it. He smiled as he put his phone back on the dashboard and listened to it play. There once was a bittersweet man, and they called him Lemon Boy. He was growing in my garden, and I pulled him out by his hair like a weed. But like weeds do, he only came and grew back again. So I figured this time I might as well let him be. Lemon Boy and me started to get along together. I helped him plant his seeds and we'd mow the lawn in bad weather. It's actually pretty easy being nice to a bitter boy like him, so I got myself a citrus friend. Russia could feel a tear fall down his face, but it wasn't a tear of sadness. Sure, he did miss his lover, but he had come to peace with the fact that America was gone. He would never fall in love with another person, but he had his family to care for and to care for him. Even if some of them weren't related by blood, who said that matters when it comes to love and caring? But soon his bittersweet started to rub off on me. You'd think smelling like lemon zest would be pretty neat. I found out that my friends are more of the savory type, and they weren't too keen on compromising with a nice lemon pie. So Lemon Boy and me, we just gotta get along together. I'll help him plant his seeds and we'll mow the lawn in bad weather. It's actually pretty easy being nice to a bitter boy like him. So I got myself a citrus friend. Russia sang. He could see Chips wagging his tail out of the corner of his eye. But what if I run out of fertilizer? What if the clouds run out of rain? What if Lemon Boy won't grow no longer? What if beaches dry of sugar cane? Oh, well, the whales start to beach themselves, tortoise shells tear away from their spines. It happens all the time. It happens all the time. Lemon Boy and I, we're gonna live forever. Like Snufkin and Little My, we'll get around wherever. Lemon Boy and I, we're gonna live forever. Like Snufkin and Little My will get around wherever. It's actually pretty easy being nice to a bitter boy like him. 'Cause we're the bitterest boys in town. Yeah, we're the bitterest guys around. And now I got myself a citrus friend. Russia sighed as the song ended. The rest of the car ride was quiet, but it was a comfortable silence. He didn't need to talk. There was no awkwardness, just peace. Russia pulled into a parking spot and hopped out. He grabbed a leash and let Chips out of the car. He wasn't afraid that the dog would run away. He had just found that people took more comfort in seeing that the dog was on a leash. Perhaps it looked like he was under more control. Who knows? Russia smiled and waved as he saw Germany and Poland at an outdoor table. They had gotten an outdoor one because it was the only place they could keep the dogs. They weren't allowed inside, so they just stayed on the patio, which no one seemed to mind. The two men waved as they saw Russia. "Hey man, how's it going?" Germany asked as Russia sat down. Chips and Fritz were greeting each other with wagging tails. "I'm doing well. How are you and Poland?" he asked. "I'd say we're doing pretty good, too," Germany said, looking over at Poland, who was petting the small dachshund in his lap. Russia chuckled. "I swear, whenever Duxie is around, she's always in your arms, Poland," he said, making the other two chuckle. "I mean, you're not wrong," he said, looking off to the side guiltily. A waitress approached and asked if she could get them anything, drinks or appetizers. "We'll have a beer," Germany said as Poland reached for his husband's hand. The woman nodded and looked over to Russia. "You have vodka?" he asked. She nodded. "I'll have that then," he said, looking over to the appetizer menu. "Any appetizers?" she asked. "Not yet," Germany said, knowing that neither he nor Poland had looked at the small menu, and that Russia hadn't gotten enough time to. Eventually, the three ordered and ate their food, talking about other random things going on in the world. Poland laughed as Germany complained about how some countries were always asking for more time on their paperwork, and how he had caught them slacking off. He then started ranting about how UN wouldn't do anything about it, just saying that they could have more time. They eventually finished their food, and after a small argument on who was going to pay, they decided to split the bill. Russia scoffed. "You should have let me pay," he said. Germany huffed. "Well, I think you should have let us pay," he said, grabbing Fritz's leash and starting to walk down the streets. By now, it was dark, and most other restaurants were very busy. Poland let out a little gasp, making Germany look over and worry. "Can we get ice cream?" he asked excitedly, tugging at Germany's arm. The man sighed. "Okay, sure. You want to come too, Russ?" Germany asked, looking over to the taller man. He shrugged. "Sure, I don't have anything else to do," he said. He let out a sad smile as he saw that it was America's favorite ice cream place. They walked in to a small line. Poland looked up at the flavors. When it was their turn, the man behind the counter asked what they'd like. "I'll have a vanilla with hot fudge on top, please," Poland said like a happy child. The man nodded. "Cup or cone?" he asked. "Small cup, please," he said, smiling like he had just won the lottery. Germany smiled and kissed the smaller man on the forehead. Russia smiled. He always admired how well Germany treated Poland, especially considering the rest of his family. "For you, sir?" the man asked Germany.
Butter brickle in a waffle cone, please, he said, holding Poland's hand. The man nodded and turned to Russia. I'll have Dutch chocolate in a waffle cone, the tall man said. Germany looked over to Russia with a raised brow. Wasn't that America's favorite flavor? Yes, it was, Russia said with a sad smile. The man behind the counter handed the countries their ice cream. They paid and left. They all walked to the nearby park and let Chips and Fritz run around with each other. You remember when we used to do this all the time? Poland asked before getting another spoonful of vanilla and hot fudge. They all smiled sadly. Yeah, America would always be super flirty to Russ, Germany said. The other two chuckled. Remember that one time Germany was super drunk and... Let's not, Germany said, cutting the Russian off. Poland and Russia chuckled. Germany had gotten super drunk and was doing some inappropriate things. It's not like you're super innocent either, Germany said, smirking at Russia. The taller man's face flushed bright red, making Poland and Germany both chuckle. It was quiet for a moment as they all ate their ice cream. It's kinda hard to think that he's been gone for about 6 months, Germany said, his eyes starting to tear up. I know, it was so quiet after you left. It was too quiet, Poland said, thinking to how America would always be just a little obnoxious at the UN meetings. Even if people said they didn't like it, when it was gone, it just didn't feel right. Yeah, everything was so cold, Russia said. Speaking of, the next UN meeting is tomorrow, isn't it? He asked. Germany nodded as he finished the last of his cone. Russia sighed. If that's the case, we'll need to wake up early. What time is it now, actually? He said, pulling out his phone. Oh, wow, 11:30. He said, slightly surprised that it had managed to get that late. Oh, well, in that case, we should be heading home, Germany said, pulling Poland closer to him. Chips! Russia called. Fritz! Germany called. Poland bent over to pet the white dog that had come at Russia's call. See you tomorrow, Floppy, he said with a smile. Russia smiled as he said his goodbyes and made his way back to the car. Ever since the incident about a month and a half ago, Poland had always greeted Chips and said goodbye, almost as if he were treating the dog like a good friend, always calling him by the name of Floppy. Then again, Chips had saved his life, so it was understandable that the dog liked him so much. Russia sighed as he got in the car and started to drive back home, Chips sticking his head out the car window and enjoying the wind. Chapter 18. Chips! Russia called as he grabbed a few folders full of paperwork. The white dog came trotting in, licking the last of his food off his muzzle. The man smiled and opened the door. By now, it had become perfectly normal for Russia to bring Chips to UN meetings. Most countries liked seeing the dog. Plus, they knew he had saved Poland's life. Others weren't too keen on the idea, but they dealt with it anyway. Russia hopped into the car and pulled out of the driveway. He smiled as he parked his car in one of the parking spots and walked into the UN meeting. Chips sat at his side. The two men made their way down the halls to the room where the meetings were held. People looked up from their small conversations. Some waved or said hello. Others just continued with their conversations. Russia walked over to his usual chair in between Ukraine and Kazakhstan. For the most part, the meeting was boring as usual.
UN was just talking and talking, always in the same monotone voice. Then the meeting was suddenly interrupted by someone running down the hall, yelling, "Fire! Everyone out! There's a fire!" Then, almost as if on cue, the fire alarms went off. Countries started to panic as they all tried to shuffle towards the door. Russia managed to catch a glimpse of Poland clinging onto Germany's arm. Most of the countries were heading right towards the main entrance, but Russia stopped as he heard a woman yelling for help. He ran to the left towards her voice. "Help! Help! I'm stuck!" she cried, banging on the elevator doors, which were only a few inches open. Russia looked around, looking for something to help get them open with, knowing that he wasn't quite strong enough to pull them open himself. He saw a desk with a loose leg in what looked like someone's office. He quickly ran in and grabbed the table leg and pulled until it popped off. He grabbed the large piece of wood. "Watch out!" he yelled as he wedged the table leg in between the doors and pushed, using the wood as a lever. After a few moments of struggle, the doors finally opened. "Thank you, sir," she cried. He nodded and let her run ahead. He listened for any more voices. None. Just the crackling of the ever-nearing fire. He felt panic strike him. He turned around to see a bit of the ceiling crack and fall into the middle of the hallway. Then it dawned on him. He was trapped. Countries looked around, making sure everyone had made it out safely. Wait! Where's Russia?" Ukraine yelled. Everyone looked around. Chips was staring at the flaming building. Loud sirens interrupted the crowd, informing them that the firefighters had arrived. "Russia! He's still in there!" Ukraine yelled, stumbling forward towards the flaming building. "Yuk, no!" Canada yelled, grabbing his significant other's arm. "No, Canada, I have to save him. He's still..." Ukraine was cut off by Canada pulling them into his chest. By now, the building was engulfed in flames. Russia was panicking. "Think, Russia, think. Water and fire is bad. Bathrooms." He yelled in his head as he rushed into the men's bathroom. Considering that the women's ceiling had collapsed, he looked around. There were flames at the edges of the room. He climbed on top of the urinal, trying to stay as close to the water as possible. "Help! Somebody help!" He yelled as loud as he could, but no one could hear him over the crackling of the flames and the commotion between the countries. Well, everyone except one who heard him. Chips lunged forward, though was stopped by Germany as Germany grabbed the dog by his red collar. "Chips, no!" he yelled, holding the dog back with all his might. This only made the white dog pull harder. Germany watched in horror as the prong of the buckle started to slide out of the hole that was keeping the collar from falling off. Finally, it slipped out, and the white dog ran into the blazing building, sending Germany falling backwards onto his rear. He reached out his arm and yelled, "Chips!" America looked around frantically, straining his ears for Russia's cries for help. After hearing another "Please, someone help" from a familiar voice, he started to run towards it, but stopped in his tracks as he saw a piece of the burning ceiling had fallen down in his way. He took a deep breath and jumped, landing on the other side. He gave a quick glance back over before continuing to run towards Russia's voice. The tall man felt tears rolling down his face. Then he heard a bark. He turned his head to see his dog. "Chips, what are you—" He was interrupted by a small coughing fit. What are you doing here, boy?" he said. He could feel the smoke stinging his eyes. The dog barked again and walked over, gently grabbing the man's hand in his muzzle.
He started to walk towards the door of the bathroom when there was a large crack. The two's eyes widened as the doorway collapsed in front of them. Had they just been a little faster, they could have been crushed. The two exchanged glances until the dog noticed that there was a window on the other side of the bathroom. He ran over and started to scratch at the window with his paws. Germany didn't bother to hide the fact that he was bawling his eyes out. He stared at the red leather collar in his hands, admiring the golden tag with chips engraved into it. Ukraine was still crying into Canada's chest. Then Poland squinted, as he thought he heard something. "Quiet! Everyone quiet!" he yelled. Soon the crowd became silent. He looked up at the building, hearing faint barks. Then his eyes widened as he saw two white paws and two large arms banging on one of the windows. "They're alive!" Germany yelled, his tears of guilt turning into tears of joy. The firefighters wasted no time getting a ladder over to the window. Everyone's heart dropped as it just barely didn't reach the window. Russia banged on the window again, almost falling too far forward as it shattered. He ignored all of the glass in his arms as he saw the ladder on the back of the truck was just too short to save him and Chips. He flinched as he heard the ceiling start to crack. Russia lunged forward, embracing the white dog in his arms and holding him tight. Russia felt something warm cuddling up against his chest. He smiled as he enjoyed the feeling. Then he furrowed his brows in confusion. "Wait a minute," he thought as he opened his eyes to see a field filled with golden flowers. Then he looked down to see a face that he hadn't seen in a long time, staring at him. Tears immediately started to stream down his face. "America!" he yelled, smashing his lips against his lover's. The kiss was passionate. Russia thought that a moment like this would never come again. After a few moments, the two pulled away. Russia gasped. "You have wings. Do I have wings? Am I dead? Where's Chips? Is he okay?" Russia exclaimed. America smiled as he set his hand on Russia's. "Chips is okay," he said, looking into the taller's eyes. "Where is he?" Russia asked. America just stared into Russia's eyes. "He's right here," America said. At first, Russia was confused. Then it dawned on him. He looked over to America. Mary, were you..." "Yes," he simply replied, while Russia just looked dumbfounded. America chuckled. "And yes, we are both dead. Yes, again, we both have wings, just like everyone else," America explained. Russia, of course, had many, many more questions, which America answered politely. Eventually, Russia went silent and let a few tears fall down his face. "You have no idea how much I missed you," he said, just barely above a whisper. America felt his own tears starting to stream down his face. "I love you, Ruski." "I love you too, Mary." The end. And that's the end of this book. I hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, for once in my godforsaken life, I actually know what's next. What's next is, the book One Way Out. So I look forward to reading that, and I hope you do too. That being said, I hope you have a nice rest of your day, night, or whatever it is for you. Just enjoy your time. And I will see you tomorrow.